Here it is, 1960s bluegrass banjo exuberance put together with all the bells and whistles. This is a story of a really great and unusual banjo, a true product of 1960s growth of bluegrass exuberance in America. And it's this banjo was put together from parts of different Gibson instruments, some from the 60s, some from the 30s, and it's a most interesting thing. The most recent part is the rim down here, which is early mid-1960s Gibson Mastertone. It's got what you banjo nuts will know is the flathead tone ring. Gives a nice fat warm sound, and typical Gibson mahogany resonator, all that kind of stuff, and what they call the one-piece flange. The neck is the most interesting part. It took a lot of detective work to find out how that neck started, because it's been done and redone and covered over so many times. And as it turns out, we finally figured out that the neck was from a 1930s Gibson RB-1, the number 1 indicating that it was their cheapest or least expensive version, RB meaning regular banjo in the model parlance of the day. And the RB-1 was not a Mastertone, it was a plain Gibson resonator banjo. So this neck was an RB-1 neck, and we figured that out by a few of the inlays, which are very standard Gibson RB-1 inlays. The 3rd fret, and I think the 7th and the 9th, those are original. We can tell they're not copies. We can tell that they're spot on. It's got the neck contours and shapes of 1930s Gibsons, which were pretty shallow around the back. They're very, very comfortable necks. The neck is definitely a Gibson-made neck. It's a factory-made neck. It's not a copy. There are people who make wonderful Gibson copies out there, but there are always telltale signs that can be seen in factory stuff. Has to do with the curvature around the heel, the cuts in the peghead, etc., etc. Unmistakable Gibson factory stuff. And how we can date it is in part by the peghead inlay. This Scripps Gibson logo up here, mother of pearl, that's original. It's not a copy. The copies are never quite, they don't have quite the same irregularities as the originals. We can also tell that the frets and the fingerboard binding here are original. There's a certain way Gibson did it. In terms of factory work, it was a cost-cutting way of making bound fingerboards and putting necks together. They would, in those years, slot and fret the fingerboards, file the fret ends flush, then glue on the binding, and then trim off little overage parts, leaving little nubs of plastic. You'd have to get down with a magnifying glass, but we can see them here. And these are definitely original Gibson frets, 1930s Gibson binding. The fingerboard inlays, that's a whole other story. This is overkill to the nth degree. Somebody had decided to inlay every single fret. It's a beautiful job, by the way. There's very little or no filler on these. I did a lot of inlay work in my youth, and I can tell high quality work from amateur work. It's great work. There sure is plenty of it. And why not have every fret? May as well. The tuning machines on this are also 1960s overkill. They are Grover Rotomatics, which were the finest you could get for guitars. Martin put them on their best guitars, like D28s in those years. These are American-made Rotomatics from the 60s. I can tell from little nuances, later ones from later years. They have Phillips head screws rather than slotted. It's minor stuff, I know, but we can always tell. And somebody said, oh, I have to have the best. I'm putting on Rotomatics. They're not really traditional banjo pegs, which would go out vertically from the back, but somebody said, oh, I gotta have that 12-to-1 gearing. So here they are, Grover Rotomatics. Has an early version of a geared 5th peg, which they called a Kroll geared 5th. Now they're ubiquitous, they're everywhere, made by different companies. But the tailpiece on this banjo, it's a 5-finger tailpiece. You can adjust each string individually, as opposed to the inexpensive tailpiece that Gibson used at the time, made by a company called Presto. This is hot rodding every single part that could possibly mechanically updone and visually updone it's been done. The banjo came to me from a member of a group that had top 40 hits of folk-type tunes in the very early 60s. The Highwaymen, yes, not to be confused with a later group of the same name put together by Bob Dylan, but the Highwaymen in around 1960 or 61 had what became a top 40 hit in the wake of the Kingston Trio and those other folk groups. Their hit was Michael Row The Boat Ashore. It was played ad infinitum on the radio. You couldn't get away from it. And there were a couple of other hits by folk groups. There were the Brothers Four, and there was always four guys, whatever. But this group, the Highwaymen, had another hit of cotton fields, those old cotton fields back home, and went away. The banjo came to me from one of the original banjo players in that group. I believe there were a couple in those years, and he's had it in his closet all this time since the 60s, and finally time to find it a new home. And so here it is, came to me, and we're going to find a nice, appreciative new home for it.